She started out as a lawyer, but just as she was about to be appointed as a young judge, someone redirected her to a university role instead, and within just a few years, she became its president. And then just as she became president, the pandemic hit. Did that derail her? Quite the contrary. She became widely known for successfully leading the university through the rigors of COVID, kept the school open, and now leads an institution with a 6% enrollment increase over that time period when the national average is a 6% decrease. She is also widely known for her entrepreneurial vision, showing how a small-town university can revitalize its community. And I can't wait for you to learn a lot about character from President Suzanne Davis. Hi, everyone. My name is Doug Newton, and this is a special series called People Worth Admiring, showing you how to develop your character. And I know no greater way to develop good character than the power of admiration. But who should you admire? That's the question. So in this special series, I present you with some great options. People whose stories and comments will inspire you and shape your character because they are people worth admiring. Again, welcome. Hey, this is the fifth and final week in our August 2023 guest month, where we've been interviewing some fascinating people whose lives demonstrate wonderful character traits. And I can't wait for you to meet President Suzanne Davis. She is an overcomer. I mean, wait till you hear the challenges that she faced as a young person and how she processed those challenges and grew into this life of character. So what do you say? Let's get started. Well, Suzanne, it is just great. I am so thankful that you made some time for me in your super busy schedule. I happen to know that you are all over the place. There's no telling where you might be, and sometimes even on horseback. So anyways, it's just good that you could manage to give a little time today. I've been really excited. You're the last of the 5 interviews that we're doing in this special guest month. Those that have been viewing or listening to the podcast have been just giving feedback and how each one is different. And this is going to be unique as well because you are a really unique person in many respects. I think that's going to come out in the interview today. But anyways, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, I know you as president of the university that I've been connected with over many years now as a board of trustees member. And I've said in the previous podcast, I'm dipping into people that I know in these podcasts. And I encourage everybody who's watching or listening to these podcasts to just take advantage of the fact that our character develops as we admire people. And there's no better people to look at, to admire than those that we know, and that in fact, we have more confidence when we are admiring people that we know very well, because they're not going to ultimately let us down and become something that we didn't know that they were. And so there's kind of a staying power that comes from admiring people we know. So anyways, but yeah, the people who are watching or listening today don't know you and don't know your background. So why don't you just give us a little run-up on where you are now, and maybe just a few highlights about how you got to be where you are.
Sure. So I didn't anticipate being a university president, but that is what I'm currently serving in that role at Greenville University. And I actually started out with a heart for the legal profession and did practice law for a period of time and was teaching a few business law classes at a state institution at the same time when an opportunity to join my alma mater in administrative leadership presented itself, as well as teaching. And in a smaller college, you can do both sometimes, faculty and administration. And I actually went to my mentor, an attorney who, he was actually getting ready to appoint me to a vacant judge position, which had always kind of been my goal, my dream. I went to law school. And I told him, I'd kind of been recruited to come back to my alma mater. And he said, and I was very surprised, he's like, Suzanne, you could spend a lot of time in the legal profession as a judge, and you'd kind of end up on the back end of people's lives. But at a
Huh.
university setting, you can be at the front end of their lives and impacting some of the most critical decisions they make a lot of times in that 18 to 22, 26-year-old range, when they're making choices about careers, vocation, spouse, all sorts of things that impact the rest of their lives. And so I took that advice and kind of changed course literally within a couple weeks. Decided to move to Greenville and pursue higher education instead of law.
So, so you decided not to be a judge, but to be someone who's in a position of being judged, right? You know.
Well, that's that way. Yes, I think that's probably correct. Yes.
Well, I'm assuming that this decision that you had to make. I mean, it really is a radical change in terms of orientation, but it probably had something to do with your affinity with people of that age and the kind of things that they're dealing with. Why don't you fill our folks in today, maybe on some of those background reasons that it really gave you a heart for this particular age group?
Definitely, my life was drastically transformed by my experience in college. And I was dealing with a lot of life choices, but not only that, just trying to reconcile the grief that my family had gone through with this genetic disease that impacted
Hmm.
both of my brothers. And then my dad actually was terminal with cancer when I was in high school. So I just, was trying to wrap my head around what is the meaning of life more than just a career choice, a job. I was really grappling with some of life's biggest questions of,
Hmm.
what does it mean when this is all over? I was thinking about, kind of the end in mind.
Hmm.
Whenever obituaries are read for very young people, you think about how you don't always have the promise of tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so I myself was very deeply impacted by my undergraduate college experience. And I just see a lot of students today, even especially in the wake of the pandemic, they
Hmm.
are thinking about deeper questions of life, more than just, what am I going to be doing for the next 4 years, or even as a career choice. They're thinking about meaningful work. They're thinking about purpose generally in life. And so I just think it's a critical time. I know it was a critical time for my daughters who also came here and had their own hurts and passed. We adopted them at 14
Wow.
and just had a lot of life under their feet, and they'd seen a lot. They came from a really tough background. And so the choices they made, the learning curve they had, not just in the classroom, but outside the classroom in undergraduate, in their undergraduate years, were transformative. So yes, I do have a particular affinity to this age group as well.
Well, and during that season, as you were entering into college, I mean, uh, just I remember hearing, and I don't know even all the details, but you spent, was it the first semester going back and forth between Greenville at that time college and St. Louis because your dad was in the hospital, or was it your brother that was in the hospital?
My brother, they were researching this rare genetic disease that my family had, at Washington University, one of the only places that they were researching the disease. It's called MELAS. But so he was in the Barnes Jewish Christian Network. He was in ICU there. And so I actually, every night or most nights after classes and after volleyball practice or track practice or whatever it was, I was sneaking over to St. Louis, and it's only 45 minutes to St. Louis, and then coming back to campus to be able to be with my family during that time. So my brother ended up passing my sophomore year of college, and so that went on for about a year and a half,
Wow.
that I, and it's just this dichotomy of just being part of a campus life has so much vibrancy, so much energy, all the fun things that you do. And so the dichotomy of going to frankly, the children's hospital kind of areas where he was, and seeing that kind of suffering. And then coming back to an environment with all this energy and youth, and going, back and forth was just something that really made you think about life from a different perspective, I guess, than maybe most college students have. However, I've seen that be the experience of quite a few of our students. And in fact, we tend to
Hmm.
attract students that are kind of overcoming something in life, because
Hmm.
we are looking for students of character and service. That's our mission statement. That's our
Hmm.
core values institution. And it's interesting how correlated some amount of experience with suffering, especially just things that can't really be explained, uh,
Hmm.
does drive someone to a deeper level of character and reflection, and oftentimes a propensity to serve others.
Did you see in, uh, you know, I don't know how self-aware you were when you were a preteen and then a young teen and then moving on to college, but probably somewhat. None of us are all that self-aware at that stage. But did you see, as you look back now on yourself, did you see some way in which all of that shaped your character, or did you come into that situation going through those tough times with some character already? I mean, kind of on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you see as what was a shaping result of you and your character during that season?
Definitely, I grew in character, observing other people who clearly had, I guess, by the world standards, less to live for,
Hmm.
being some of the more joyful people, positive people, others focused people. Um, and so it was hard to sit in my own selfishness
Hmm.
for very long. So the more you're around that kind of environment, and this environment really started for me when I was 8 years old. That was the significant event where my one brother started having seizures and strokes, that would ultimately lead to this neuromuscular decay and death. And then my other brother actually had more of the mental decline.
Hmm.
And so there was one brother experiencing physical decline, the other mental decline, from about the time I was 8 or
Wow.
10. So I guess that was formative early on, but the first iteration of me dealing with that was definitely kind of chasing the wind,
Hmm.
and looking to run from suffering and
Hmm.
run from these tough issues. Um, I mean, I would say then when I came to college and saw that it wasn't unique to me. I mean, although it was a tough situation, but there's a lot of people, right, going through so many things right here as we speak, just right in our backyard. And obviously, we're not, it's not helpful necessarily to compare, but I will say just understanding that part of our human condition is to grapple with these issues and decide who you're going to be
Hmm.
in response to them. And so you can either choose a much more selfish route, much more self-indulged route, or you could choose to be a person of character, humility that comes with that.
Hmm.
I live in the 3%. There's no reason I should not have the impacts of a genetic disease. So to think I've, was a lawyer, now a university president, that there's literally a 3% chance of that happening with this disease. So I don't take for granted a single day. I have a much more humble outlook, I think, because I know I'm so blessed, and gifted to be where I am.
Yeah.
And so that outlook, along with a uh, propensity to serve, a propensity for resilience, and resolve that comes with that, is um, definitely a result of that experience that I had in college.
So what I like to do with my guests that when they're on is I like to tell them why, according to this list of 12 character traits that I tend to focus on in some of the character work that I've done, and not to embarrass my guests, but it each one of the guests that I have on, and you're included today, Suzanne, is because there are certain character traits that you really embody that I'd like to call attention to. One of those, you've talked about humility already, and that is, I mean, you are a strong leader. You're driven, hardworking. You're creative. You're all the things that kind of the Type A personality is known for, but in an unusual way. You're really humble, and you involve other people. You listen carefully. You respect other people, and you're very, very careful to not going around taking credit, but giving credit and all. I know, I happen to know, and it's probably no surprise to our guests, that you are also a Christian believer, and you're very careful to acknowledge God's role and His grace and His goodness and all of the things that you've accomplished. And yet you are a person who accomplishes so much. And I could talk about the perseverance. I could talk about the vigor. I could talk about your diligence and everything. But the last one I want to land on is your courage. Not everybody, most people probably wouldn't know. Maybe they would assume that being a leader in this day and age is particularly difficult because we have a habit in our culture of distrusting leaders, of being suspicious, and also we live in a culture where everybody's opinion, so as far as we think, is as good as anybody else's, and so it's hard to sell anybody on anything these days. And it just takes courage to lead. It takes super amount of courage. But on top of that, you are very entrepreneurial, very creative. So a lot of the things that you can see that maybe because you're visionary are things that people can't yet see, and it takes a lot of courage to kind of move out in a direction and when most people aren't necessarily ready to go, and there's a lot of risk involved. And you remind me of, and then I'll shut up in a minute, but you remind me of the movie First Night. It's not necessarily a well-known movie with Sean Connery and Richard Gere, and it's the kind of a retelling of the story of King Arthur and Lancelot and so forth. And the movie starts with Richard Gere as kind of a traveling swashbuckler who would go around from village to village, inviting some of the strong, stout guys to try to do battle against him with a mock sword fight type thing, and he could dispatch anybody. And this one guy comes up to him and who everybody in the town thinks he's got to be the best, sword fighter in town, and Richard Gere just takes care of him, not killing him, but he just knocks the sword out of his hand within like almost 15 seconds. And the guy goes, "How did you do that? How did you do that? Teach me how to do that." And Richard Gere says, "Well, all right. First, you have to know your opponent really well." And the guy goes, "I can do that. I can do that." And then he says, "And then you got to be able to read your opponent and know what he's going to do before he even does it." And the guy goes, "I can do that. I can do that." And then he said, "And then you have to not care whether you live or die." and it's like, when I think about you as a leader, it's like you're not all tied up in your role. You're not all tied up in who you are and what you want to accomplish. And it's like you're willing to die, in your role. And, I don't have to have this for my identity. It's all of that makes the kind of courage that you have. And I would suppose that some of that does go back to the specter of death and the experiences of death that you had to grapple with during your teen years and so forth. So I want to go back to that. You made a statement, and you said, and let me pull you back here. And you said, so I had to make a choice. I could have chosen to kind of be more of the self-absorbed, maybe even self-pitying person, or I could be living my life for others. I mean, how did you make that choice? Did someone influence you? Was there a crisis moment?
So when my brother actually passed, and it was profound for me. I had written a paper. I had to wrap my head around things. I'm kind of more of an introvert. And so I had written a paper about the problem of natural evil and suffering and the belief in a good God, or something higher than me. At the time, I wasn't necessarily able to say the God of the Bible or something specific, but I was able to say, how do you have a belief in something more positive when you see this amount of evil and suffering that
Yeah.
seems to just be part of humanity and part of our experience. So you can kind of understand man-made evil, right? Because you can understand that we all have an element that is not good. And so you can understand when other people's choices affect you, but when
Yeah.
there's some sort of natural suffering. So I was writing about this topic, and I think I had to wrap my head around that intellectually before I was ready for the experience of when my
Mm.
brother actually passed. And it was a cold January day, and literally hundreds of people showed up at his visitation. And there was a common theme that just brought me to my knees. And that was, your brother was probably suffering in some of the worst sense, in that he was a healthy, all-star baseball, very
Mm.
popular student until, junior high and then high school. He had this neuromuscular decay and ended up, in the hospital in the ICU unit for the better part of 18 months, and
Wow.
so, but during this time, I mean, so it wasn't like it was an easy, it wasn't a quick process, I guess you'd say. And during this time, we watched him, he couldn't hold a real job, but he worked as the activity director in a nursing home, although like unpaid. So he's
Mm.
volunteer. So it's a real job, but it was volunteer that he did this. And he brought life and light to so many people. And these people who I didn't know who they were, just that was the narrative. And they talk
Mm.
about my other brother who had the mental health issues, and just how much they had meant to them. And literally brought them to a deeper sense of character and selflessness than they'd ever would have experienced without knowing
Mm.
them. Um, and I think that then gave me the connection, not just of mind, but also of heart,
Mm.
to have the courage to not live in just this what happens to me state and react to it, but rather this overcomer state, that it's really not what happens to you in life, it's more what you make of it.
Mm.
And that can be more of your legacy, your experience, than what just happens to you.
Yeah. How do you help young people today who are coming into college? I mean, this is way too big of a question, but maybe just a couple things that you could say to a young college student coming in about the kind of character that they're going to need for life, but they haven't yet faced those kinds of things. How do you tip them off? How do you alert them and what would you say here, if you're going to make anything kind of a target right now in this time of your life, this would be the kind of thing to target.
So I spoke to our new class of freshmen yesterday, and have opportunity to do that often. And I tell them a little poem. This is an odd epitaph on a tombstone I used to ride my horse by, and it at least gets them thinking whether they've experienced this or not. But it says, "Remember, friends, as you pass by, as you are now, so once was I. As I am now, so you must be. Prepare for death and follow me." So that
Mm.
seems really creepy, right? And really odd. But for whatever reason, when I was a young adult, I rode my horse past that and thought to myself, wow, that's very true. You
Mm.
may not be facing what you think are these circumstances, but we all know that our days are numbered.
Mhm.
We even say, can you tell me your grandfather's father's name or
Yeah.
anything about them?
Yes.
And you're okay. If you can, then go one step further,
Hmm.
and probably you're going to lose it pretty quickly. And so then it becomes, what kind of a wake are you leaving? What's your life matter in terms of what are the decisions that you're making today? Because every day is a new choice. Um, so what are the decisions you're making today that leaves something that lasts?
Mm.
Maybe no one will remember your name, but somebody will remember how you made them feel. Somebody will remember, uh, you know, how you, just like my brother had this impact being in a nursing home as an activity director, they will remember your positivity, and then they will pass that on. That aspect of you will live on. And to me, that's where you can start, whether you've dealt with those circumstances or not, you can start grappling with things that actually matter in life, and drive yourself towards more meaning, as opposed to things that really won't last.
Yeah. So been talking a lot about kind of the specter of death today, but that's not the only thing that drives you.
Oh,
I know you well enough to
no.
know, okay, I better do something because I'm going to die soon, or that type of a thing. But so what is it? What is it today that kind of takes the place of just the specter of death and drives you? And what, where are you finding kind of the character resources to just keep going under? I mean, this is a tough time. I mean, schools are closing all over the country, and Greenville is dealing with challenging situations, but partly, largely because of your leadership and the leadership of others, it's making it and all. What is it? What's kind of right on the immediate horizon for you, way before death, that's helping you to continue to kind of live with these strong character traits?
I think you said it when you said courage. There's definitely, everyone that I have looked up to as a mentor, or just somebody you admire, has remarkable courage, to lead, because they believe they're making a difference in the
Hmm.
here and now, right? And like you said, it's something, whether others see it, or appreciate it, um, you're doing it the best you possibly can. Um, and you're willing to go down with the ship, or whatever you
Hmm.
said,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter about you personally. It just matters that, you're willing to give it your best shot. And I wake up, every morning, just, believing, as I walk around campus. It's actually not hard when you're on a college campus, because I had a kind of a rough day yesterday, but anytime I have a rough day, I just walk around the campus at night, and you're like, wow, this is worth it, because we are doing things here that it matters to this one. It
Mm.
matters to that one. And I think, so often, we maybe try to do things that, um, maybe will go down in history, or something, some sort of legacy that changes the world. And although, I mean, maybe that's a great, maybe that's your calling, maybe that's what you're supposed to do. I think a lot of us need to live in the, what I'm doing today matters for this one, for
Mm.
this person. There's that old proverb kind of story about the guy who's picking up the starfish on the beach and throwing, them into the ocean, and the young boy says, why are you doing this? It's not going to make a difference. They're still going to wash up on the shore tomorrow and the next day. And he's like, well, he picks one up and says, it matters to this one, and throws it back into the ocean.
Yeah.
And I've always had that kind of perspective, even, with adoption, for instance. I think the mentality of adoption, we've been adopted as children of God, obviously, but to pay that forward and adopt,
Mm.
as your own, and day in and day out love someone that, in theory, you didn't have to love, you
Mm.
didn't have to care for, you didn't have to serve. That's where you really find, that depth of character,
Mm.
uh, find that meaning and purpose. And it's no question that you do it another day, because it's so fulfilling,
Mm.
right? and
Mhm.
and so if you want, I mean, your legacy to be, obviously you could be a president of a university, a president of a company, a president of the United States, of the UN, whatever you want to say, that like seems like, oh, of course that'll have a lasting legacy where they will remember my name. I mean, yes, maybe, but I've talked to a lot of people in those roles, and still their most powerful story is when they impacted the one,
Mm.
right? Like, so they changed the world for one person, and that was enough.
Yeah.
To me, it's not hard to have the courage to go another day in all of the tough environment, if if it matters to one more graduate of Greenville University, it matters to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, kind of putting all of this together, here's what I'm hearing, and I'm really glad that our listeners and viewers are hearing this. There is a sense from everything that you're saying, you boil it all down, that character is something that we're drawn toward, that grows out of a strong sense of a purpose and a meaning, and that is going to have in itself a shaping power in giving you, the kind of things in your will that you've got to have in order to fit into that place of meaning and purpose that you so highly value. And that's clearly who you are. Any last thoughts that, here's one thing that I came here today and I knew that I wanted to say X, whatever that is?
I was just thinking as you were talking before, and especially in higher education, and I especially are fond of critique as a lawyer, the legal profession, but I do challenge now people to, yes, you need to have critical thinking. You need to critique ideas as they're given to you. Obviously, not everything in the internet is true. Like, all these things are important, critical thought. But I also am kind of challenged by the start of her book, and so many others about it's not the critic who counts. She just quotes another person. But
Well, I'm interrupting this podcast because as Suzanne was talking about critique and critics, she was thinking of a quote and she couldn't remember who it came from, and got in touch with me and subsequently asked if I would drop in the actual full quote into the podcast. So the quote came from President Theodore Roosevelt, and this is how it goes. It's really worth listening to, maybe even memorizing. He wrote, "It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasm, the great devotions, who spends himself in worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." Wow. Great quote. Now we'll return to the podcast.
And the reason why it's not the critic who counts, because you asked in the beginning, there's all sorts of critique of leadership. And I do hear that critique. I humbly accept the constructive criticism.
Yes, you do. Yes.
But that said, if you can build something that impacts other people in a meaningful way, you have to be careful about the critics, because that can really tear down your ability to lead, the courage that you have, the persistence and resilience and perseverance. If you listen to it too much and let it impact what you're building. And so I think that as an entrepreneur, as anyone who is leading an organization, you just have to be careful in today's environment where the critique is so loud that it doesn't stop what you're called to do, and it doesn't cause you to stop building, because it's hard to build. It's easy to critique and it's hard to build. And so you have to be able to silence some of the noise, but also have the humility to recognize when you're blocking out constructive criticism. Anyway, I was just thinking about that as you talked, and thinking about the role that critique has in your life, and how you deal with that, especially as a leader.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you so much for giving your time. I'm sure that you're off to 10 more things to do today, and that's all got to be done by by midnight tonight. I'd like to just pray for you, like I try to close with all of my guests. Father, thank you for Suzanne. Thank you for the privilege of being able to call her by her first name when her role as well as her accomplishments deserve to be called President Davis. And I pray your blessings over her, her husband Phil, her daughters. I pray just your blessing over all of the things she puts her hand to. Though she speaks of her personality being a little bit more introverted, you've placed her into a role of great leadership, of being a person out front, a person leading, a person whose vision has to catch hold of the hearts and minds of many people and to call them forward. And so I pray that you will bless her with the ongoing courage, perseverance, humility, the strength, the vigor, the resolve, all that's going to take to be in that role as a humble person. And so we just give you thanks for her and for the things that are coming in the future that she's already working on now, and pray that she will be kept in your care. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you again. Appreciate it very much. And we'll get an opportunity to, I hope, get some feedback from people who've been watching this on how it might have influenced them. So thanks, Suzanne.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it.
My goodness, wasn't it great to meet Suzanne? And I hope you found yourself admiring her, but as she would want much more, actually being inspired to find the kind of meaning and purpose in your life that will draw greater, stronger, and better character out of you. Now, if you appreciated this interview, why not subscribe to this channel? It's going to tell YouTube that there are people out there who are interested in this kind of podcast about good character and developing your character. Now, next week, I'm going to return to my regular podcast content on At the Intersection with Doug Newton, where I help you discover the kind of character needed to align with Scripture faithfully as you engage our culture graciously. And remember, we talk about it as a no-gripe zone. So until then, check out the previous 4 interviews this month, if you haven't already. Some fascinating people. But I do hope you'll follow along every week as we meet at the intersection of Scripture, culture, and character. But in the meantime, don't forget, keep looking around for people worth admiring. It'll do you good and the world around you.